Imagine being a woman convicted of a crime in ancient Rome. Maybe you stole bread to feed your children. Maybe you refused a magistrate's advances. Maybe you simply angered someone powerful and being sentenced not to execution but to the ludus, the gladiator training compound, where you would be strict, examined for suitability, assigned to fighters as sexual property, and then dressed in mockery of armor to be killed in the arena for entertainment, while thousands cheered your humiliation. You were told you would die with honor. You were never told about the months of nightly assault before your public execution. You were never told about the damnatio ad ludum condemnation to the games, which meant your body belonged to the lanista, the gladiator master, to use as he saw fit. You were never told about the noxi performances, where female prisoners were raped by animals or forced to reenact mythological scenes of sexual violence before being killed. You were never told that your death would be staged as entertainment, your suffering choreographed for maximum spectacle. In a few minutes, you will understand what happened in the cells beneath Roman arenas. In a few minutes, you will understand why female prisoners were considered more valuable alive than dead. In a few minutes, you will understand why Roman law distinguished between male and female damnatio, because the cruelty designed for women was systematic, sexualized, and designed to destroy dignity before destroying life. This is not fiction. This was judicial punishment. This happened in the Colosseum, in provincial arenas across the empire, every single day for 4 centuries. Tertullian, a Christian writer in 1997 CE, described arena executions of women with barely concealed horror. Women condemned to the beasts are first given to the gladiators, that their modesty might die before their bodies. Seneca the Younger witnessed midday executions and wrote with disgust about female prisoners being exposed to every indignity before death, and the Digest of Roman Law, compiled in 533 CE, explicitly stated that women condemned ad ludum or ad bestias could be used for the pleasure of the game's participants before their final performance. What Roman legal scholars codified as punishment, we are about to recognize as institutionalized sexual torture. What arena spectators cheered as justice, we will see as choreographed brutality designed to maximize suffering. Before we go deeper into Flavia's story, if you want more histories they buried in legal euphemisms and sanitized museum exhibits, subscribe now and hit the bell. Because once you hear what happened to 26-year-old Flavia when she was condemned to the gladiator school in Capua in 112 CE, you will never see Roman spectacles the same way again. And when you reach the moment that disturbs you most, and you will tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what shocked you the most. The year was 112 CE. Summer heat shimmered over Capua, and Flavia, a freeborn woman convicted of poisoning her husband, the charge she denied but could not disprove, stood in chains before a magistrate who sentenced her not to a quick death, but to damnatio ad ludum, condemnation to the gladiator school, 6 months of service before her execution in the arena. She thought the worst part would be dying in front of a crowd. She was wrong. The worst part would be the 6 months leading up to that death. Flavia had been a tavern keeper in Pompeii. Her husband, a drunk who beat her regularly, died after eating a meal she prepared. A rival accused her of poisoning. No evidence existed beyond suspicion, but Roman courts did not require evidence for convictions of lower-class women. The magistrate pronounced sentence: 6 months at the ludus in Capua, then execution by beast in the arena. The crowd in the courtroom murmured approval. Justice would be served. They did not ask what service at the ludus meant. They did not want to know. Flavia was transported in a prisoner wagon with 8 other condemned women. They ranged in age from 15 to 40. Their crimes varied: theft, adultery, Christian worship, disrespecting a magistrate. The punishment was identical. All condemned ad ludum. All destined for the arena. The journey took 2 days. The guards did not abuse them during transport. That would come later under official supervision as part of the punishment protocol. The ludus in Capua was one of Rome's largest gladiator training facilities. It housed perhaps 200 male fighters 30 trainers, and a rotating population of condemned prisoners awaiting execution. The facility was organized with brutal efficiency. Male gladiators lived in small cells but received adequate food, medical care, and training. They were valuable property. Condemned prisoners lived in underground chambers, received minimal sustenance, and existed solely to serve the ludus before their deaths. They were not property. They were inventory with expiration dates. Flavia and the other women were processed by the lanista, the gladiator master who owned the school. He examined each woman personally, checking teeth, assessing physical condition, noting age and appearance. He was not evaluating them for combat ability. Female prisoners were rarely trained to fight. He was evaluating them for other purposes. When he reached Flavia, he paused. She was 26, healthy despite weeks in prison, literate to detail noted in the sentencing documents. He made a notation on his wax tablet. She would be assigned to the senior trainers first. Higher status meant they received first access to valuable resources, including condemned women. What followed was explained with bureaucratic clarity by an overseer named Gallus. The women would be housed in a communal cell beneath the training grounds. Each night, they would be assigned to gladiators or trainers, as alludum privileges, rewards for good performance, incentives for loyalty. The women had no right to refuse. Refusal would result in immediate execution, with no arena performance, no chance for a quick death. Compliance meant they would at least die publicly, perhaps earning sympathy from the crowd, perhaps dying quickly if the gods were merciful. This was presented as a choice. It was not. The cell was stone, windowless, lit by a single oil lamp. 12 women shared the space, sleeping on straw mats crawling with lice. Twice a day, slaves brought food, hard bread, thin gruel, water that tasted of metal. The women were not chained. Where would they run? The ludus was surrounded by walls. Guards patrolled constantly. Escape meant recapture and torture before death. Compliance meant only rape and eventual execution. The calculation was simple. The first night, a guard arrived after dark. He called 3 names. The women stood, mechanically, faces blank. They had already learned that emotion invited cruelty. They were led upstairs to the gladiators' quarters, individual cells lining a long corridor. Each woman was delivered to a different cell. The doors closed. What happened next occurred behind wood and stone, private yet systematic, individual yet institutional. Flavia was assigned to a Thracian fighter named Spartax. He was perhaps 30, scarred from years of combat, emotionally detached. He did not speak to her. He did not ask her name. He used her body with the same mechanical efficiency he used his weapons. No passion, no malice, just function. When he finished, he gestured to the corner where she could sleep. She lay on the stone floor, staring at nothing, counting breaths to keep from screaming. This would be her life for 6 months. Every night, or every other night. Different fighters. Different cells. Same violation. But the nightly assignments were only part of the horror, because the ludus also prepared women for their arena deaths, and those preparations required rehearsals. Flavia learned this in her second week, when she was taken to the training grounds and told she would be practicing for her execution performance. The lanista explained with chilling casualness. Her death had been sold to a sponsor who requested a mythological reenactment. She would play Pasiphae, the queen who was cursed to mate with a bull. In the arena, she would be placed in a wooden structure designed to position her appropriately, and the trained bull would be released. If the bull performed as trained, her death would be both sexual assault and execution. If the bull did not cooperate, gladiators would finish the job. Either way, the crowd would be entertained. Tertullian, writing in De Spectaculis around 200 CE, described exactly these performances. Women condemned are brought forth and subjected to bulls trained for the purpose. The crowd laughs. The crowd cheers. They call it myth made real. They call it justice. They do not call it murder because the law has declared these women already dead. The rehearsals were clinical. Trainers positioned Flavia in the wooden apparatus, adjusted straps and restraints, timed how long it took to secure her. A bull was led into the arena, not released, just present to acclimate her to its size and smell. The trainers discussed logistics like carpenters building furniture, how to position her for maximum visibility, whether to remove her clothing before or during the performance, whether the bull should be drugged to increase aggression or left natural, every detail calculated for spectacle. Flavia's terror, her humiliation, her suffering, all part of the show's design. And through it all, the nightly assignments continued. Different fighters, different trainers. Occasionally the Lannister himself, asserting his ownership. Flavia stopped counting after the 40th assault. Numbers lost meaning. Time lost meaning. She existed in a state of perpetual dissociation, her mind retreating to memories of her tavern, her childhood, anything that was not this stone cell and these brutal men. Some women broke completely. A 15-year-old girl named Priska, condemned for stealing, stopped eating in her 3rd week. She died of starvation before her scheduled execution. The Lannister was furious. He had already sold her death to a sponsor. The loss represented wasted investment. Her body was dumped outside the city walls, unburied, unmourned. Another woman, an adulteress named Claudia, attacked a guard during an assignment. She was executed immediately, crucified outside the ludus as a warning. Her screams lasted 2 days before dehydration and exhaustion killed her. But most women survived to their scheduled executions. They learned to dissociate, to comply without resistance, to preserve themselves for the arena death they had been promised. It was the only control left, choosing to die publicly rather than privately, choosing a quick death in front of thousands rather than slow starvation or torture. The illusion of choice was all the system allowed. Flavia's execution was scheduled for the Festival of Vulcan, a multi-day spectacle featuring hunts, executions, and gladiatorial combats. She would perform on the 2nd day, during the midday executions when crowds were largest and most enthusiastic. The night before, she was not assigned to any fighter. She was given extra food and water, not mercy, but practical necessity. The sponsor had paid for a healthy victim who could struggle convincingly. Dehydration or weakness would diminish the spectacle. Morning came with sounds of the crowd already gathering. Flavia was led through tunnels beneath the arena, passing cells holding animals, lions, bears, bulls. She could smell blood and fear. The executions before hers had already begun. She could hear the roars of beasts and screams of victims. Her handlers were professionals, efficient and emotionless. They stripped her, oiled her skin so it would gleam in sunlight, and positioned her in the wooden apparatus. The bull waited in an adjacent pen, massive and disoriented by noise and confinement. The gate opened. Sunlight flooded in, blinding after weeks underground. The crowd's roar was deafening, 50,000 voices screaming for blood and spectacle. Flavia was wheeled into the arena. The announcer declared her crime and punishment in a voice amplified by the architecture. The crowd cheered. This was justice. This was entertainment. This was Rome. What followed was never recorded in detail by historians who valued decorum, but archaeological evidence from Pompeii includes graffiti describing arena executions with graphic enthusiasm. One inscription celebrates the whore Glycera who serviced the bull before dying well. Another praises the criminal Julia whose screams made the crowd laugh. These were not aberrations. They were typical responses to performances designed to elicit exactly this reaction. Flavia's suffering lasted perhaps 20 minutes before a gladiator was sent in to finish what the confused, terrified bull had begun. Her death was finally quicker sword through the heart. The crowd cheered one final time. Slaves dragged her body through the gate of death to the spoliarium, where the dead were stripped of anything valuable before being dumped in mass graves outside the city. But Flavia's story contains one moment the records did not anticipate. In her final weeks, she encountered another condemned woman, a Christian, named Perpetua, awaiting execution for refusing to sacrifice to Roman gods. Perpetua was different. She did not dissociate. She did not comply silently. She prayed openly, sang hymns, and spoke of a kingdom beyond Rome's reach. She was insufferable to the guards, who beat her regularly. But she inspired the other women. She reminded them they were still human, still worthy of dignity. Rome denied them. On the night before her execution, Perpetua was assigned to a particularly brutal trainer. She refused. Explicitly. Loudly. The punishment was immediate crucifixion. But before the guards dragged her away, she looked at Flavia and the other women and said in clear Latin, "They can kill our bodies. They cannot kill what we are. Remember that. Die knowing they failed." Perpetua was crucified the next morning. She sang hymns until her voice failed. She died after 6 hours. The lanista was furious at the lost revenue. Her death had been sold for a beast execution. But the other women remembered. Flavia remembered. And when her own death came, she did not scream or beg. She stared at the crowd with eyes that accused rather than pleaded. It was a small defiance. It changed nothing about her fate, but it was hers. Flavia's name appears in exactly one document, a ludus ledger from Capua, listing condemned prisoners and their scheduled execution dates. Flavia, poisoning. Ad bestias. Vulcan festival. No age. No description. Just inventory waiting for disposal. But she existed. She endured 6 months of systematic brutality designed to destroy her humanity before destroying her life. And she died defiant. The practice was widespread. Every major city had arenas. Every arena featured midday executions, and female prisoners were always part of the spectacle, their bodies used twice, once by the men who trained them, once by the crowds who watched them die. The system functioned for centuries, supported by law, celebrated in graffiti, ignored by historians who preferred to write about emperors and battles. Archaeological evidence from the Colosseum includes chambers beneath the arena floor where condemned prisoners waited. In 1996, excavations uncovered graffiti scratched into walls, names, prayers, curses. One inscription reads, "I am Secunda. They will kill me tomorrow. But I lived. Remember I lived. Remember I lived." We do not know Secunda's crime or her fate, but her words survived Rome's collapse, preserved in stone, demanding acknowledgement. The laws that permitted this are gone. The arenas are tourist attractions, with placards describing criminals punished according to Roman justice. But the women who died there deserve more than sanitized explanations. They deserve to be remembered not as criminals who received what Rome called justice, but as people who survived institutionalized torture before being murdered for entertainment. Flavia's story is not over. There are more voices scratched into ancient walls, more names in ledgers listing inventory destined for death, more histories buried beneath phrases like ad ludum and damnatio ad bestias, legal terms that concealed systematic horror. If this moved you, tell me in the comments. If you want more stories they tried to erase with bureaucratic language and architectural grandeur, subscribe. Because their silence ends here. Because Flavia existed. Because Perpetua sang. Because Secunda lived. And no empire, no matter how powerful, can erase that truth completely.